Good afternoon. Welcome to Maples Memorial United Methodist Church and our devotion on this Memorial Day. It's a special day, so I want to do a little bit of a different kind of devotion today. I come to you from my dining room, living room, kitchen, total room. It's been a good day. I've got a lot of work done. I hope you have had a good day with your family, friends, celebrating. For me, as a kid growing up, Memorial Day was always a day that we got a lot of stuff done. It was one of those extra days that we would have um, to, to work and uh, clean up, straighten up, do the things that we maybe had put off. And I hauled off a whole pickup bed full of stuff today and donated it to Salvation Army. Felt good. It felt good to be able to control my surroundings, to decide what needed to be let go of and what needed to stay, and then hand it off for somebody else to use as good. Those are traits that are ingrained with us as Americans. The idea of sacrifice, to giving more than receiving. Those were instilled in me as a small child. My father was a patriot. He served 4 years in the Army and strung a whole lot of telephone lines across Puerto Rico. Um, but he was always a patriot in the way he looked at America. I grew up watching really great movies, Sands of Iwo Jima, all those great John Wayne war movies, Fighting Leathernecks, Midway, the original. Great stories like The Longest Day, Sergeant York, stories of heroism. I learned to be a patriot. Watching James Cagney play Yankee Doodle Dandy and in such a great way. Um, George M. Cohan's story. If you haven't had a chance this Memorial Day weekend, watch it. And it's a great story of a man that was an unabashed flag waver. I listened as a kid to the stories, the song Johnny Tremaine of Old Boston Town. Remember that name? He fought in Folksman Brown. He fought in heart. He fought in war for because his heart was free. He fought in war for liberty. Johnny Tremaine. Johnny Tremaine. The Swamp Fox. There was a record that we played as a kid. Swamp Fox, Swamp Fox. Have you heard? The Swamp Fox was an American Revolutionary War hero that fought in the swamps of South Carolina. The Swamp Fox. All those great stories of the great patriots and George Washington. Um, Men like John Adams, who taught me that it's sometimes tough to do the right thing. John Adams, who defended the British soldiers that were involved in the Boston Massacre because he believed every person deserved a defense. John Adams, who pushed us to revolution. Ben Franklin. The story of the writing of the Constitution. The story of the writing of the Declaration of Independence. And the men that bravely signed it. Men who lost everything that they had ever had. Many who even lost their lives. Great stories. They were ingrained in me. So on this Memorial Day, I pause to remember those that gave their last full measure of devotion, men and women throughout our country. From the earliest days that went to war to defend us, or in peacetime to provide a ready defense. War is awful. Someone once said that war is hell. George Patton famously had some things to say about war. War is never the best option. It's always the worst option. But it is the last option, sometimes, that we must take to defend our freedom. For those men and women that paid that last full measure of motion, it is all good and appropriate that we pause this day to remember them and their sacrifices, but not only theirs, but of their families. I think of the four Gold Star families from World War II that lost whole generations. I remember as a kid listening to my Uncle Houston and my Uncle Gene tell stories about World War II. Uncle Houston landed on Normandy at D-Day. And I remember hearing, he didn't say much about it, but there you could tell that there was a deep reverence that he held for those men that he fought with. The men that climbed Point du Hoc. When I was a kid, Bernard Coggins from Baldwin, who was our mayor, was a radio man on a B-52 flying over England and was shot down on D-Day and taken prisoner of war. To hear his stories. On August 27, 1776, George Washington addressed his soldiers before the Battle of Long Island, not one of the more famous battles, but it was the first major battle after we had declared our independence. And this is what George Washington said. The time is now, near at hand, which must probably determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. The fate of unborn millions will now depend under God on the courage and conduct of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance or the most abject of submission. We have, therefore, to resolve to conquer or die. You and I are part of those unborn millions whose lives have been indescribably different because of the soldiers who died to purchase our freedom with their own blood. Those that have served. I never served in the military. I have great respect for those that did. Sadly, today we don't remember our soldiers in the same way. There's been an innocence lost. America has not always embraced its returning soldiers as heroes. And admittedly, America has not always been in the right. But right or wrong, our men have served to protect our freedoms. And it is sad that we don't remember and hold in high esteem those that did those things, that signed up to fight when they didn't have to, that volunteered readily and eagerly. Men like Jimmy Stewart, who was an American actor and famous, who served as a bomber pilot during World War II and volunteered to go back. Men that saw service as the highest of honors and a bounding duty for all of us that lay our heads on a pillow under a blanket of freedom, provided by those rough men who would do those things that we cannot. It is very appropriate as Christians for us to remember these things. The Jewish people have, for their entire existence, had days of remembrance. Passover marks the day that God delivered the slaves from Egypt. In Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 10, we see stones of remembrance taken from the river. I want you to hear that story. In Joshua 4, it says, "Now when all the nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, 'Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, one man from each tribe, and command them, saying, Take up for yourselves 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet are standing firm, and carry them over with you, and lay them down in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight.' So Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the sons of Israel, one man from each tribe, and Joshua said to them, 'Cross again to the ark of the Lord your God in the middle of the Jordan. Each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Israel, and let this be a sign among you, so that when your children ask later, saying, What do these stones mean to you? Then you shall say to them, Because the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it crossed the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be a memorial to the sons of Israel forever.'" memorials. One of the most moving memorials I have ever personally witnessed is the Vietnam War Memorial, Washington, D.C. In the summer of 1992, I got to spend some time in D.C., and I walked that wall, black granite, stark, thousands of names. And as you would touch them, it was just moving to know that this person gave their life. To see sons and grandchildren etching the names. To stand there was moving. One evening, I walked from there up to the Lincoln Memorial and sat down. There's a guy there, it was at the time, his name was Larry, and if you've been there, you know Larry was the guy that pushed the cart that had the ice cream. He had one leg and had all the Vietnam War memorabilia on his hat. He was a rough customer sometimes. But he sold those little cups of ice cream and sherbet with the little wooden spoons. And I bought two, as I would do, and went and sat in front of Mr. Lincoln and watched the sunset over the mall. And I was moved to tears for Larry and for men like him. Because just as there are those that pay that last full measure of devotion with their lives, there's many that have bought our freedom with their limbs, their eyes, their spirits, and have come back changed. It's important that we remember. When we remember the valor of our past heroes, we are inspired to emulate that courage in serving our nation and our people today. When we remember our unity in warfare and in freedom, in independence, striving so many years ago, and in world wars to defend the world for democracy against tyrants like Adolf Hitler, Mussolini, and Emperor Hirohito of Japan. When we remember those that fought, we are inspired to serve and sacrifice together for our good and for the glory of the Lord. We remember the grief of those that lost loved ones. We join in their grief. They are not alone. In fact, such remembrance is so important that it should be part of every Memorial Day. But not only should we remember just this day, but it should be every day. And we should teach our children this. We should instill this in them. We should talk openly and proudly about that sacrifice. We should tell them the stories. Let them watch the great stories that we have put to film. Not glorifying war. Not making it some great and noble cause, because it's always awful. It's always horrible. It is always painful. But because we honor those. Now, we do a pitiful job of honoring them because we can't very well do it the way it should be done. Sunday morning, I read for you the Gettysburg Address, and a friend of mine challenged me. She said, well, you memorized that in high school. I said, do they do that still? Do they have to memorize the Gettysburg Address? Like we did that, and Chaucer's prologue to the Canterbury Tales in Middle English? They should. Mine will. 77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this nation, on this continent, a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We're gathered on a great battlefield of that war. We've come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here have given their lives as a last full measure of devotion. It's altogether fitting and proper that we should do so. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow the ground any more than these brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have already consecrated it. They've done it far above our power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living, rather, than to be dedicated to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It's rather for us to be dedicated here, now, to the great task remaining before us. That those honored dead, we take increased devotion, the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that those dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government, all the people and by the people and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Maybe we need to hear those words almost daily. There was a dream. There was America. And that dream is not dead. It lives and beats in those of us that remember. Remember the great cause of freedom. That it is better for a man or a woman to live free than any other way. That there is a true power in freedom. It has done more to lift more people out of poverty, to lift more souls, to lift more goodness in this world than any other form. It's not perfect. But freedom is in and of itself good. Why? Because God gave it to us. You see, there was a change in America. America made a change in the world. Till then, the world was dominated by the divine right of kings. The power came from God to the king, and the king loaned it to the people and his servants, to the select few. America changed that. In America, we said, no. Every man is created equal in God's eyes, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, meaning the power of those rights does not come from a constitution, does not come from a written document, does not come from a social contract, does not come from agreement of the people to be led by this certain government. No, it is unalienable. It cannot be taken away because the rights come from God. God gives the power and the freedom to men and women everywhere. And we loan it in part, not the whole, to our government for our mutual well-being. That's who we are. That's who we're supposed to be. We are a people, a free people. Maybe not as free as we would like. Maybe we've not always used that freedom as we should, and maybe we've not been the paragon of moral virtue. But for all our failings and all our shortcomings, for all, taking all to mind, this is still the greatest and most free place on the earth. It is that shining city on the hill and the last hope for democracy and freedom in the world. It is the last bastion of freedom. Star Spangled Banner was written by Francis Scott Key on September 14th, 1814, at the beginning of the American Revolution. British warships sent a downpour of shells and rockets onto Fort McHenry in Baltimore Harbor. They pounded the American installation for 25 hours. It became known as the Battle of Baltimore. It came only weeks after the British had attacked D.C. itself, burning the Capitol, the Treasury, and the President's home, the first White House. It was another chapter in the ongoing War of 1812. Sorry, I said Revolutionary. I should have said 1812. A week earlier, Francis Scott Key, a 35-year-old American lawyer, had boarded the flagship of the British fleet on the Chesapeake Bay in hopes of persuading the British to release a friend who had been recently arrested. His tactics were successful, but because he and his companions had gained knowledge of the impending attack, the British did not let them go. They were allowed to return to their own vessel, but they stood under guard. And he watched all through the night as that bombardment fell. This is what he said. It seemed as though Mother Earth had opened up and was vomiting shot and shell in a sheet of fire and brimstone. When darkness arrived, all he could see was the red glow of the night sky. And considering the scale of attack, he felt the British would win. The War of 1812 was basically a continuation of the the Revolutionary War. The hours passed slowly, but when the smoke cleared at the dawn's early light on September 14th, he saw the American flag, not the Union Jack, flying over the fort, announcing an American victory. I want you to hear the words of the Star Spangled Banner. I'm going to get them right. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. On the shore dimly seen through the midst of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dread silent repose, what is that which the breeze o'er the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner, oh long may it wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. And where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood was washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, thus be it ever when freemen shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. We love it so much. I think you do too. The words of the Star-Spangled Banner. Does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave? It does. That very banner hangs in Washington, D.C., the National Museum, the Museum of our National History, National History Museum. It has been restored and still hangs today. Does the flag still wave in our hearts? I know one thing, that when free men and women stand to defend their home and their way of life, they are worth 10 hirelings, 10 mercenaries. They are worth far more. And each drop of American blood that purchased this freedom is valuable to us this day. And so, as we stood at Normandy and looked over the graves, those men that fought and died by the thousands to retake Fortress Europe, to make the world safe for democracy, let me end with this. May God bless us. May God bless the USA. May He refine our every flaw and make us the greatest force for freedom peace, and justice. Justice of the Lord in this world. God bless us. I hope you have a great Memorial Day. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to say a prayer today. Father God, we thank you for the great gift of freedom. Perfect our every flaw, O Lord. Make this nation a beacon of light in a dark world, because its people are not great, but because they are good. Not because they are good, but because it is your goodness that lives in our hearts. May there be a fresh revival of freedom that is brought forth for a fresh revival of love for you. Make us good. Make us right. And make us just. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you back here tomorrow night at 6 o'clock when we'll be talking about He's coming back. We'll get a little bit more into that sermon and the scripture and Jesus' impending return. Thanks.